Intellectual Property is proudly brought to you by Adams & Adams, rooted in 100 years of excellence in intellectual property law.
Welcome to Intellectual Property, our first show in a 13-part series. My name is Stephan Lamprecht, and this week we will give you insight on the business application and impact of intellectual property. I'm joined in the studio by IP practitioner Don McRobert from Adams & Adams Attorneys. Don, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Stephan.
Don, when we talk about intellectual property, how would you define intellectual property for the man in the street, for the business person? Is intellectual property only for attorneys? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Intellectual property is for the everyday business person, and more particularly it deals with the creativity or ingenuity of that business person. Okay. People create ideas. People invent things, and that will be covered by patents, for example.
Okay.
People come up with a new name or a brand for their product and they market it. That's a trademark. Other people come up with wonderful slogans or else works of art or else legends or stories. That's copyright. Those are examples of intellectual property.
But is intellectual property only important for me if I want to create something or if I have created something? Is it important also for people that maybe consume intellectual property or that do business in an environment where intellectual property has some impact?
Intellectual property covers a wide range of people who create, in other words, the industrialist, the manufacturer, to the distributor, to the retailer, the wholesaler, to the advertiser. Everybody has a hand in dealing with some form of intellectual property along the chain of this creation.
Okay, very well. And if I think about some of the well-known brand names, for example, Coca-Cola, or I think about the patent for a computer product like an Intel inside, is it important also to other people outside of scientists and engineers? Surely it's not just the white coat lab people that use or impact on intellectual property.
In fact, the best story about intellectual property starts with the person, a small business, SMMEs. In fact, one of the better stories is that of a person who was a lecturer at the University of Pretoria, and in his spare time over the weekends would go down to the Patents and Trademarks office, because public could go and inspect on Saturday mornings, they were still open, and he would go and check the trademarks registers to determine the availability of the names or brands of interest to him. And he at the time was starting to dream of his future and dream of his programs, and what he did was he registered his first brand, which was the Rembrandt van Rijn with the artist and the cabaret and the beret. And of course that was the late Dr. Anton Rupert.
Okay, very well.
And his first trademark registration, and one can see the dream taking shape, the first trademark registration for his Rembrandt van Rijn was in respect of brandy. Not cigarettes that we all know, but brandy. His second registration was in respect of pipes, smoking pipes.
Okay.
Only did he get to his third registration in due course, which was for cigarettes, when the cigarette business started, and then of course later on the liquor. But he started like you, like I, like the ordinary person in the street, with a dream to make money through intellectual property development.
Very well. So that was the start of the whole Rembrandt group and the whole Rembrandt legacy. Very good. Now, if you think about the man in the street, I think about some of the examples, and I think you recently published a book as well regarding intellectual property. Is it really becoming something that is for the masses? Meaning, this is a business show, we're thinking very much about business, but when I walk in the street and I see all these brands, how is intellectual property becoming more and more the domain also of the consumer, people that are in the use of intellectual property?
Your everyday consumer becomes a discerning buyer because they know the different brands of clothing or footwear or beer or whatever it may be, and they know the brand through lengthy and extensive use. And because of that use, they then formed an opinion as to the quality, because the trademark or the brand carries with it a stamp of quality, a stamp of authority, a stamp of uniqueness or like or preference.
So there's a promise of what the consumer can expect.
there is a promise as well. And so it is very useful for a consumer point of view to be able to study. One looks at the newspapers, one looks at the television ads to see what's new on the market, what new products, what new names. Let's get with it.
Very good. Now, if you think about South Africa, we hear a lot about government making a lot of claims about us moving towards the so-called knowledge economy, meaning we've got a long legacy of dependence on resources, mining, minerals, and so forth. But in the knowledge economy, what is the role of intellectual property?
The role of intellectual property in a knowledge economy is going to grow because, for example, people will have new ideas. They need to protect those ideas. And I want to emphasize for your viewers that you need to protect your intellectual property. You need to protect your patent, your trademark, your copyright. Make sure it's protected so that in due course you can make money and to make sure that people don't copy it. And so the knowledge industry that we're heading into requires more and more protection, more and more investigation into protection that we need. Do we need to protect copyright in computer programs, computer systems? Do we need to have patents in respect of, if it's possible, computer programs, computer systems for certain practical application? Do we need to protect the brand? And that's usually the biggest marketing tool. Yes, so it's growing.
Okay. Now, I think, for example, if you can maybe give us one or two case studies from your coffee table book, just to make it very tangible, just to wrap up today, what kind of practical applications of intellectual property law have you seen in South Africa in the last few years? Something that stands out from your experiences.
I think in the first instance we're seeing that people who guard their intellectual property carefully are able to stop the thieves. And I'm thinking of counterfeit goods. With 2010 coming up, we're seeing a growing rollout of more and more counterfeit goods coming into this country.
Yeah.
If you've protected yourself carefully, your intellectual property, your brand, your copyright, you can stop that. So that's one of the greater developments of late. Secondly, we're seeing a rollout in the IT world. We're seeing more and more people being involved in intellectual property, dealing with information technology, creating systems, creating websites, domain names. All of these are playing a much bigger role in our work, but in particular in industry. We're all becoming electronically linked, electronic send-outs, electronic messages, electronic purchasing. It's all happening.
Okay. I think just looking at from a trademark point of view, I'm always fascinated by trademarks in the sense that traditionally we thought about IP always from a patent point of view, but you know, if you think about the rollout of licensing programs for Soccer World Cup 2010 and so forth, is it something that ordinary South Africans can get into? Is it an opportunity for us to also put our brands on the market?
I think for 2010 it's a bit of both. If we can become an approved licensee of the approved FIFA licensed products or the LOC products, fantastic. But it also gives us an opportunity to say, here's going to be a wonderful economic explosion to match the soccer, which is going to be played. Sure, we could come up with new ideas, new concepts, maybe new umbrellas for people to take to the parks, maybe new things for us to use as spectators or viewers of the wonderful game that's going to evolve.
Thank you very much, Don McRobert. Join us again next week when we look at the different forms of intellectual property and how businesses can use them to their advantage. Until then, from me, Stephan Lamprecht, it's goodbye.
Intellectual Property was proudly brought to you by Adams and Adams, rooted in 100 years of excellence in intellectual property law.